Strategy and Resources Policy Committee for the 15th of December 2025. First item on the agenda is to welcome members of the committee to the meeting. I'm not quite sure if it's the last committee meeting before Christmas, but it certainly is my last public meeting before Christmas in City Hall. At least as far as I know. Who knows, things may change. First of all, just like to remind everyone that the meeting is being webcast, so do mind your P's and Q's. And just to remind everybody of the emergency evacuation procedure, we're not expecting a drill. So in the event of alarm sounding, please leave the room calmly via the lobby area and the main front door of City Hall. Turn right and walk down the ramp towards the cathedral, and the assembly point is in front of the cathedral. And please wait until somebody has notified you before either coming back in or disappearing, whatever the case may be. Agenda item number 2, apologies for absence and substitutions. I believe we have an apology from Councillor Tom Blenkinsop, and I believe that's the only member apologies we got. I don't blame Tom either. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? I'll go from this end, Councillor Blake.
Thank you. Well, there's a couple of items on the agenda where I'm chair of the Robbins Foundation, and obviously we've got plans to provide supporting facilities in Bristol South. I just wanted to sort of flag that. I think it's a non-pecuniary interest, which particularly relates to item 7. And I'm also a board member of SS Great Britain, and I think that relates to item 9 in terms of the cultural update. But I think I don't need to excuse myself. I think it's a non-pecuniary interest, but I thought it was important for transparency to raise it here. Thanks, Tony.
Okay, thank you, Kelvin. Councillor King and then Councillor Townsend.
Just to cover bases, I'm a Feeding Bristol trustee. Item 13, Task and Finish Group on Supporting Low-Income Households, has discussed the funding of Feeding Bristol.
Thank you. Councillor Townsend.
I just wanted to declare for item 7, my child goes to an Oasis Academy. Not either the ones that we're looking at, but another one, so kind of related, but not particularly.
Okay, thank you. Any other declarations of interest? In that case, the last declaration of interest is myself. I am a trustee of the Bristol Museum Development Trust, as you will know, because in some previous meetings I've had to excuse myself. But in this instance, we haven't taken any votes or any interest. Well, I wouldn't say we haven't taken any interest. We're deeply interested in the cultural element in particular. Okay, so minutes of previous meeting. Are there any comments about the minutes of the previous meeting? If not, can I move the minutes of the previous meeting of the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee held on 17th November as a correct record? Can I ask for a seconder?
Seconded.
Hi, Sarah. Miles away today. Can I ask the committee if they are content to confirm the minutes as a correct record? If you can show your hands in favour. Thank you. Agenda item number 5 is Chair's announcements. I have a very sad announcement to make. Members of the Strategy and Resources Committee will be aware that fairly recently we discussed a proposal by the Bristol Historic Buildings Trust to look at bringing forward a business case to look after Aston Court Mansion going forward. One of the key people involved in that, and somebody who has been involved in rescuing quite a lot of Bristol historic buildings, is Norman Radcliffe. I am sorry to say that Norman recently passed away, and I'm sure we all send our condolences to his family, and I think want to publicly put on record our thanks for all the work that Norman has done in the past. I think several of us have buildings in our wards or have visited or made use of buildings that probably wouldn't exist today if it wasn't for the work that Norman has done. So I just want to enter that on the record. Thank you. The other chair's announcement is, after that sad one, is a slightly happier one, is that I'd just like to wish you all a very good and restful holiday period. We all know how hard people in this council work, both members and officers. And I'd just like to thank everybody for all the work that they put in. Obviously, sometimes people say about politicians arguing all the time. Well, we don't argue all the time. We often agree on a great many things, but we also are very passionate, and that sometimes means that when we debate matters, we do so strongly because we want to put forward our point of view and the points of views of those we represent. So thank you all very much, and have a really great break. Agenda item number 6 is public forum. We have one public question. I don't think any members of the public are here, but the question has been responded to and they would have had a written response. We also have 3 public statements. The public question was from Alan Morris, the Bristol Walking Alliance, regarding Section 106 funding for MSED and its environs. And then we had 3 public statements, one from Azure Amos about a sustainable alternative to repeated street cleaning, one from Steve Chalk about Oasis Academy New Oak and Oasis Academy John Williams Girth sites. And the third one was, again, from Bristol Walking Alliance about Section 106 funding for MSED and its environs. All statements have been received by the councillors on the committee and would have been read. And as I said, a written response would have been provided to Alan's question on behalf of the Bristol Walking Alliance. Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item number 7, which is the disposal of playing field land at Oasis Academy sites. I'd like to advise the committee that this report, 1, provides information on a Section 77 consultation in relation to the disposal of playing field land at Oasis Academy John Williams and Oasis Academy New Oak in Engrove. 2, seeks approval to progress the in-principle disposal of the playing field land at Oasis Academy John Williams and Oasis Academy New Oak to deliver a mixed-use development of new homes, school provision and sports facilities. 3, seeks to secure delegations for decision-making on the details of the disposal. This is a key decision as it involves spending more than $500,000. So I would like to invite Louise Davison, Head of Housing Delivery, and Tim Huntley, Housing Development Manager, to outline the report. Louise.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and good afternoon, councillors. You will recall that in September, S&R Committee felt it didn't have sufficient information in front of itself to make a decision about the proposed in-principle disposal of this land, deferred the decision and asked officers to go away and come up with a more full report, which we've presented you this afternoon. So just a reminder, memorandum of understanding that established the principles of the project was signed in 2023 between the Council and OCL. And by way of recap, the proposal is for the Council and Oasis Community Learning to work in partnership to secure a development partner who will build around 370 new homes, including policy levels of affordable housing, a new one-form entry primary school, new nursery provision, teacher training facility, SEND provision and enhanced sports provision on the playing field land, which is not used by the school due to poor drainage and undulating ground. The improved sports facilities will enhance the sporting offer to pupils and to the local community outside of school hours. And the new primary school will be net zero in use, which will contribute towards the Council's climate emergency actions. And now I've just lost my page. Sorry, I do apologise. Yes. The paper provides the requested information on the Section 77 consultation and the submission to the Secretary of State for Education, noting that there were no objections to the loss of playing fields from the existing users of the school sports provision. It also contains information on the joint development brief that we developed with OCL that will set the expectations for the developer in terms of planning and planning policy. and it provides details of how the proposal sits alongside the consultation on the playing pitch strategy, which was another matter that Councillor raised last time. If committee approves the principle of disposal of the playing fields today, the Council and OCL will develop and enter into a contractual landowners agreement which secures the terms of the project and will develop a development agreement to underpin the disposal of the site to the development partner. The Council's decision making will be supported by a full business case, and members, as Chair has already said today, are being asked to delegate the authority for approval of this FBC and the terms of disposal to John as Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration. And this will help expedite the work that we need to do to get the project moving. I am joined by Tim from Housing Delivery here, who is leading on the technical aspects of the proposal, and we are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Louise. Any questions or comments? Councillor Gillandris. Yes. As soon as I said your name, I suddenly saw Sarah's hand. So, Sarah, do you want to go first?
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this report back. And I also just want to note thank you to Steve Chalk at Oasis, because he's been really good at speaking to ward members about this development. One thing that I spoke previously about the facilities that are potentially coming to our ward, and that is very much of benefit to us. The one thing that I just want to ask about is throughout the report it talks about, along with the housing, potential for sort of open space and things like that. Is the intention that we'll be looking at things like maybe a new park, or at least sort of parkland, along with the housing, to sort of, although the playing fields are very underutilised by the school, there are a lot of dog walkers and stuff who do use those fields, and it would be good to make sure that they've got green space that they can still do that.
Yeah, I think the intention at this point in time is for there to be new green space created by the development. I think one of the issues we're looking to address is the lack of connectivity across that site currently anyway. There's a lot of green space there currently that isn't really accessible to members of the local public, certainly outside of school hours. And the development brief does talk to the need for certain types of green space provision as part of any proposal that comes forward. In particular, allotments is something that is referenced within the development brief, whether they're provided on site or whether they're funded externally elsewhere within the ward. So yes, I mean, it's too probably early to go into the detail on that, because obviously we need a development partner to come forward and kind of demonstrate what they think is achievable on the site, but we would like to include green infrastructure as part of that development as it comes forward. Yeah.
John.
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, Louise, thank you very much for organising the briefing for us with Steve Chalk. It's a long time since I've seen Steve Chalk, and he's quite a charismatic figure, hugely successful businessman and a great operator. And as he put in the public forum statement, he's running 56, I think, academies now, which is tremendous. And he's got, I think, turnover of £300 million a year and net assets of £400 million a year. He's a great operator, very keen on the transaction. He's obviously very keen on the transaction, which I think just means that we just need to be a little cautious as well to make sure it's a transaction that works for Bristol City Council as well. I'm sure we could make it work. I won't comment too much about loss of green space, because that's something that will be debated at much greater length, because I understand the transaction a bit better now. It will require full planning permission. That planning permission will allow for full public consultation. Ultimately, it's down to ward members to decide, what they want to do in terms of that. There will be much better sports facilities. Oasis have a fantastic reputation of working with the community, unlike some other academies that John Smith will know, of course, who actually are very belligerent to the community. So Oasis, very happy that the sports facilities that they'll provide will be available. So lots of ticks in boxes here. So what's my hesitation? My hesitation is it's still a bit vague. And if all you're seeking is an in-principle agreement, I'm happy. But you're asking for a lot more than that. You're asking for delegations. I think I need this to come back. Let me tell you what's my concern. The first thing is you've got a legal advice qualification. The legal advice is not, the legal officer is not happy here. The council, and I'll read it out if I may, in case of people haven't bothered to read the minutiae. I'm sorry to be a pedant on this. The council is under a duty by virtue of section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972 to achieve best value for its assets, and any disposal should be at the best price reasonably obtainable. It is not clear from this report whether the council's statutory obligation will be discharged. So there's still a lot of hesitation on the legal side, so you can understand my apprehension. Now, the actual detail is very sketchy, and there's no figures mentioned. So we could bring back an exempt report with the figures, if you wish, or I can speculate. And because I'm speculating, I have no knowledge, because I don't know the figures. But we're looking at 25 acres of housing land, £30 million. £30 million. Now, that £30 million has to be shared between the freeholder, Bristol City Council, and the leaseholder, Oasis. Clearly, our freehold interest is worth less than the leasehold interest, because it's a long leasehold interest. I've looked to see if there's a set percentage, but there isn't. But I've blown the dust off some old transactions I've seen in the commercial world, and the freeholder would be looking to get something between 20 and 25% of the deal. So assuming we sell this to Persimmon for £30 million, I'd expect the council to be getting about 20% of that. That's not clear. In fact, what it appears to be is much more complex, way too complex, which frightens the life out of me, where what we're saying is, if we get our £30 million, Oasis will then build out the schools and all the facilities, and if they cost £29.9 million, there's £100,000 left over, and we'll share that. So we're actually letting an asset, which I think is worth about £5 to £6 million, potentially go for 100k. And yes, there will be some community benefit, but make no mistake, these facilities belong to Oasis. They do not belong to Bristol City Council. So I think I'd be much happier to see some figure work. I'd also like to see a cleaner, neater deal where we get a percentage of the sale price, not some complex deal. Because how do we even know what the figures are going to be from Oasis? You know, they could be fudged, you know, I shouldn't say fudged, but I mean, you know, it would be good to have clarity. I think that's why the legal advice is concerned. I'd like to know, what are we going to get from it, if I may?
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for the question. Chair, I'll come in on that one, and that's okay. So I think there were two aspects to your comments. The first one was about the best value, the point made in the legal advice. Obviously, all of the transactions that we enter into of this type or others would need to meet the best value test. I think it's a fairly standard note that says it would need to satisfy the best value obligation. So the delegation would be subject to that, as you do. Excuse me, as you would expect. The legal advice suggests that we should get proven independent valuations and have that agreed by the Executive Director for Children and Education, who is very closely involved in the project and is on the board. So I'm very happy that we do that, and I'm very happy that the delegation is subject to us doing that. In terms of the wider financials of the deal, the Memorandum of Association we entered into some time ago was very much based on us sharing any profit that comes about after the construction of the school, which would involve, as is set out, you know, the additional facilities and indeed special educational needs provision and the various things that are set out there. So I think it's fair to say, and Steve, you mentioned Steve's presentation to us, that's set out clearly, and that's the basis on the deal that we've agreed with them, which we're seeking to finalise today, is that the school, the current utilisation of that space, as you say, can't be done without both of our agreement. The basis on which Oasis came to us several years ago was on the basis that we would develop a new school as part of also providing the housing that's available on the site. So I think it does require the committee to look at the overall benefits of the scheme, which is obviously a significant amount of housing, including affordable housing, the provision of a new school in Bristol, including with special educational needs provision, and after all of that, the potential, and is subject to all those things happening, to make a return beyond which it wouldn't, if Oasis hadn't come forward with this deal, we wouldn't be able to do it at all. So just to be very clear, I mean, I think we've been consistent as we presented it as well. That is the basis of the deal. there's no problem with saying you don't want to do that deal, but that's the deal that we've negotiated. It was part of the MOU that was signed back before the election, and that is the basis of the deal we're presenting today. Is there something else?
And just one thing to provide some reassurance is we will be bringing in an independent cost consultant to make sure that what is coming forward from OCL's side of the project is legitimate, it's robust. We'll be scrutinising those numbers so that we're not getting a building created that is well above what we have agreed, to make sure that the value that is left in the land is there and can be split. So this isn't going to just be a sort of a free-for-all, if you like, in terms of the spend of that value. Just one point, despite the whole site is, I think, 22 hectares. It's only half of that coming forward for housing.
25 acres, I said.
Fine. Okay, sorry.
So I don't understand hectares, so I had to translate it into acres. Yeah, I don't really flippant, but I'm sure the people who costed HS2 said it was all going to work out very nicely, and obviously the overspend is just part of the building sort of contract. Did we actually put to Steve Chalk the alternative, which was to actually sort of get the, obviously have to sign all sorts of little memorandums of agreement, get the planning permission agreed, and at that point, we split the proceeds. So let's just say Persimmon give us £30 million. We actually split the money at that point, and Oasis get on with building their school, and we take our £5 or £6 million.
I think it's fair to say we've talked through various different ways of doing the deal as we've gone through, Councillor. So this was the offer that they came to us with originally. We certainly had plenty of discussions with them at the time, and as we've gone through the process, various people have questioned if there'd be a different basis of doing it, and we have had lots of discussions about it, and this is where we've ended up.
Can I just come in for a second? Nick, do you want to come in, because there's a statutory duty involved here about best value?
I was just going to make a comment about Councillor Glandris's point about Section 123 of the Local Government Act. That is a statutory requirement. So if the committee were minded to approve the recommendations today, it would be delegated to the Executive Director for Growth and Regen, the Section 151 officer, and the Executive Director for Children and Education to deliver those, to take forward those recommendations. They would have to ensure that the Section 123 test was met. If it wasn't, they wouldn't be meeting their statutory duties, and we wouldn't be able to proceed. So just to reassure you that is a given, that we have to meet that statutory test. If for any reason that wasn't met, then either the transaction doesn't go forward, or we would come back to committee.
The problem, though, is that if you sign all the agreements now and you go ahead and you work it on projections which suggest that the residual figure is going to be, I don't know, £6 million, and we're going to get a share of that 3 million, or whatever, however we're going to cut the cake. The figures then start going, oh, right, it's too late, you've signed the deal with Oasis, you can't back out. It's a contractual obligation, regardless of for Section 123. It's probably best to get the deal done now, correctly, on a firm footing. I just sense that the negotiations could have been very different. I'm uneasy at the open-ended nature. I like to see clear figures, not possible figures.
I completely understand that, Councillor. If a different deal was available, I'm sure we'd be happy to take that. I mean, I guess we've seen this very much in the context of how difficult it is to deliver housing in the city at the moment, particularly affordable housing, and indeed the desperate need for investment in our local schools and our difficulty to do that as a council. So, unashamedly, this has been about considering the benefits of the proposal as a whole.
But Oasis brought the deal to us, so they're hot to trot, and we could get a better deal, I think.
Any more comments or questions? Councillor McAllister.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the presentation and the report. It was very interesting. I've got a few quick fire questions, and then one which I'd like to drill into in a bit more detail, please. So, we're told that the new housing will include policy levels of affordable housing. Could I just define what that means in this context, please? Are we talking social housing, shared ownership, HRA, stuff?
So the affordable housing will be delivered in accordance with, will be hopefully in the new local plan. So that will be 35% affordable housing, and that will be split 75% social rent and 25% shared ownership. Ideally, other forms of affordable home ownership are there. It will be made available to a registered provider partner or the council's HRA, depending on who has got the interest at the time. So we wouldn't, through the planning stage, dictate who that housing had to go to.
Okay, thank you. Now, a similar point to Councillor Glandris's, the report says we'll have £5 million roughly of residual land value for reinvestment by OCL and the council. Is that including or as part of the value that's going to go into creating the new SEND provision and so on?
That is after the new provision, and OCL have agreed, and we will put it in the landowners' agreement, that any of the capital that they make on the back of it, their share of what's left, if you like, will be reinvested into Bristol schools and provision. Okay, so I suppose potentially related to Councillor Glandris's point then is the idea that if we get 20% of what's left over, with his figures, we'd end up with about £1 million at the end of all this. The deal in the MOU and that we'll go through is a 50-50 split of what's left. So £2.5 million from that figure. Yes. Okay, that's reassuring. That's better than 100k at least. But
it could slip.
Yes. Well, this is my thing, and that's what I was just about to come on to. In the other options considered section, it talks about the reason we've landed on this way of going about this proposal for what I think are fairly sensible reasons, but it does say that this approach will expose a contractual agreement and a developer agreement exposes the council to additional risks. What are those risks and how likely are they, and why are we exposed to them?
Thank you for the question. So yes, there were a number of options that we looked at as an alternative to disposing of the land via a development agreement. This gave us a great level of control, as it's acknowledged in the report, albeit with the acknowledgement that it requires a greater resource commitment that could expose us to more additional risk. So the greater resource commitment was initially the greater cost up front in terms of developing the landowners agreement and the development agreement and taking the site out to market. The additional risk really was around, casting my mind back to the report at the time, was around potential for not being able to find a developer for the site. And by there being too many unknowns, to the previous councillor's point around not developing a planning application up front and then looking to do a deal on the land, there's greater risk there in terms of going out to the market. That was the immediate risk that I can think of at this point in time, but I can't recall the others that were highlighted, but I'm more than happy to obviously follow up on that another time.
Thanks. So the risk is effectively, if this doesn't work for whatever reason, we've spent however many hundreds of hours of officer time for nothing. I see, thank you. All right, thank you. That's my quick fire questions. I want to come back to the question. The figure given for the number of dwellings we're aiming for is about 360 units. And I think it was said in one of the briefings that it's 10.7 hectares of the land being proposed for disposal would be used for housing. That comes out to 33.6 dwellings per hectare, and I raised this in the briefing, which you kindly put on for us. That's a very low density for dwellings per hectare. The local plan, or the urban living supplementary planning document from 2018 says we should have a minimum net density of 50 dwellings per hectare. An optimum density for an outer urban area, which is 100 units per hectare. So we're coming at a third of that. And I think this seems to me to be it's a large site. I'm presuming greenfield. This is presumably quite an appetizing prospect for developers. The chance to, I appreciate there's issues with like drainage and such. The chance for the council to develop land like this and actually get something out of it that's not just homes, this new SEND provision, which I think we all know the city needs, that's a rare opportunity, and I worry that if we go for only 360 units, we are wasting that opportunity.
So the 360, 70, wherever it's sitting at the moment, came out of an intensive piece of work that we commissioned from Savills, who are advising us and OCL on the route through for the development of the scheme. And it is what I suppose called is the sweet spot of viability for the development, so that the point at which the developer, who we need to bring in and to build these homes, will make the maximum amount of money against cost. So it's the sweet spot of providing lower density homes with a higher market value. So it will then generate more income, more money, if you like, to plough into the new provision, the new sports provision, and return us both an asset or a capital sum at the end of it. What Savills were doing when they brought these figures to us was demonstrating that there's a point below that density where you make less money, but actually as you go into a higher density development, you start actually seeing less of a return for the developer. So what we've done is craft the development brief that you have seen copies of to sort of express exactly what you've been saying, Councillor McAllister, and needing to test the density that comes through when that planning application comes in, about the deliverability of everything we've said we want the scheme to give us versus the density point. So we're very, very aware of the need for more homes, but also if this scheme is going to be a success for both us and OCL, of generating the most amount of return. It's a difficult balance.
Thanks. I think my next question to that then is, we've got this estimated £5 million of residual land value, which is effectively profit. That's not money that either the council or OCL can rely on if in the future, if this doesn't go through, because it's locked up in land, which is currently not being used for anything. Why can't we put some of that money into delivering more homes on the site? I'm thinking, in my ward, we've got the same area of land would have 3-4 times the number of dwellings easily.
I think these are all things that we can take out into our discussion with the development partner when they come forward. The development, we will be looking at judging that partner on the amount of homes they deliver, the return, the provision against the spec, and everything we're asking them to do. So these are all things we can do, but we're being asked at this point then to reinvest something we don't know we have. So it absolutely, in our minds, the best solution would be higher density. We won't get to the same levels of density as the local plan will take us to in ideal terms at the moment. The market might change, costs might change. But until we've actually started seeing what the development partners come forward with, it's really difficult to sit here and go, yes, we can definitely give you X, Y, and Z. But we are really mindful of the need to maximise the housing opportunity on the site, while still being able to deliver everything else we want the project to bring forward.
Okay, thanks. I hear the need to the development market is very difficult at the moment. I understand we need to generate effectively a profit so we can fund the new SEND provision, the new sports centre, and so on. I just still think that from OCL's perspective, this deal makes a lot of good sense. From property developers' perspective, it makes a lot of good sense. From a SEND perspective, it makes sense. From the council's perspective, we need to consider all those things, but I think we also need to consider the need to deliver the housing our city needs. And I think this would, I would be uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable at the moment because I think we are opening the door towards wasting a lot of the potential of this site. Because I think the rest of the scheme proposal is a very good proposal. I think it disposes of land which isn't being used for its intended purpose at the moment, delivers some homes and facilitates new SEND provision in an area of the city which really needs it. But as the council, I feel like we should be trying to look more holistically at doing that while delivering more homes on the site. More homes means more council tax revenue. Apart from anything else, it will benefit the council in the longer run. And I suppose I'm wondering what if the council can't look to take that longer view out of maximising development opportunities now. What other body can take that view? I am wondering about trying to put something in about policy compliant density of housing as well as policy compliant levels of affordable housing.
The trouble is what we won't get then is a development partner able to make this scheme stack up. Unless we can find money from somewhere else to then start paying for the school and all the additional provision, because the money for this project is coming out of, if you like, the profit generated by building homes at the most viable density. And at the moment, the evidence that Savills is showing us is that sits around this medium to low density type of home because it has a higher value and it is less expensive to build. So we are really into that debate about what do we want to drive from this scheme. If we're driving high density, we end up with a negative land value, which means we won't see any of this come forward. So it's that balance of the total scheme delivering something for the council, not just maximising the number of homes. And I think, John, you said the same earlier. We can't do this by ourselves. This has to be a joint project with OCL, so we all have to get something out of it. And going back to that commerciality point, there needs to be a sweet spot for everybody where we all get the most out of it, whilst neither party might absolutely maximise everything. Yes, if this was a piece of land we were selling without any of the other provision needed, absolutely with what you're saying. But it's not. It's a joint project that's around the school and the SEND and the nursery and the improved sports provision, as well as building homes. So today it's really hard to say, you know, if you said, right, we're going to put in, it has to be a policy compliant level of density, Savills will turn around to us, the evidence will say, well, that actually then scuppers the scheme completely. But what we can do as officers, when those development partners potentially come forward, is really look at scrutinising and lending weight to those who are offering a higher density and still making this stack up.
Okay, thank you. That's all I've got for now, but thank you.
Well, Kelvin has been waiting quite a while to ask this question, so I'll let Kelvin go first and then you can clarify.
I guess welcome to the dilemmas of governing and governance. I mean, that's essentially it. So I think the market's changing anyway with these housing developments, certainly seeing it on fish pond sites where low density seems to be the thing that is more wanted in the area rather than these sort of higher density spots. So maybe our local plan, well, needs to be considered. I'm going to make a point about, first of all, it's a positive scheme. I want to make sure that we are, I'm my first meeting, and it's great to see that actually we are coming forward. I like to come forward with kind of plans that kind of unlock a load of other things, right? And this is doing that at this site. And obviously it's not perfect, right? If we were to design it and, but it's practical. And I'm supportive of practical solutions when it comes to this type of development. We're getting a lot for the site, from the site. So I'm happy with that. Two things around, I think, around the incentives, some of the stuff that John and Patrick's raised. So I want to be reassured that you said some of the ways we've got to tackle this incentive around spend and design and the rest of it is we're going to get some consultancy coming in to help us with value sort of driven design and what have you, so some expertise in that. And we've got our own best value requirements on officers. What else do we have? Because I'm just wondering, I mean, I suspect that we're brilliant at contract management and development management and all the rest of it. How can we be really, really good here so we don't end up ebbing away this additional money that we could end up sharing at the end of the thing? And do we have the tools during the process when we've signed the agreement and we're off running that additional costs can be somehow managed? And we have, at that point, do we have the tools available to ensure that they're not cranking up the quality and the cost, whereas actually, we already had a sort of plan for that.
Do you want me to pick up on that, John, and then you come in on top? So yes, so obviously the landowners agreement and then the development agreement will set the framework for all of this work. Housing delivery will continue to be involved. We will also have, I'm hoping very much, the services of the corporate architect and continued sort of scrutiny through our property colleagues and our education colleagues. We've spoken about the cost consultant. We will still have Savills and other consultants sitting there and legal around the whole thing. But the thing that gives me the biggest comfort is the whole project from start to finish is governed by a joint board, which John sits on and Steve sits on and Hannah is on as well. So from a governance point of view, nothing gets done unless both parties agree. So at the bigger level, even before we end up into the development world, there's a lot of scrutiny and a lot of negotiation, John, would you say, that's going on to make sure we all do get the best. And then we need to hold our development partner to account and through the planning process.
Louise, before John takes over, I think obviously this has been webcast for members of the public. So rather than saying Hannah, I think is the Executive Director of Children's Services.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, that was what I was going to mention, that we have had a programme board for some time, which Steve and I jointly chair. And there's a project board as well, isn't there, that Louise and Tim work very closely with them. We have had, as I was saying in my answer to Councillor Goulandris's question, we've had some pretty robust discussions, to be honest, so far, about what the right commercial framework is to bring the deal forward, and that's led to us getting to where we have, which I'm comfortable with and happy to recommend to the committee. I would anticipate very much that those programme boards will continue, Councillor, and where needed will be as robust as necessary to defend the Council's position.
Councillor Matt, do you want to come in?
Yeah, going back to this question of the number of units, because I don't think that was written in the developer's brief, but just in the opening of the report. The developer's brief points to, I don't think so, I couldn't find it. So the developer's brief points to the policy that they would need to be compliant with, which we all know, and that makes that clear. I guess, do we have, because even in the report it just says circa this number, is that a thing that we have to agree to and vote on now in terms of that number? Because what we're putting out to developers is, this is what we need you to do. We're not actually telling them the number now. So I was actually wondering if we can actually just remove that number and acknowledge, we've all heard and acknowledged the concerns and which way it might be going. Because is there a complication then that we're talking about a number now, but we also understand that this will be led by the planning process most of all, and we don't want to say something and agree. We don't want to vote on something now that actually potentially contradicts down the way it being compliant with planning policy, however that might go. So my recommendation is there's 2 points, both in point 1 in the first bit of the report, and then in terms of corporate strategy alignment, the second point in there where it says circa 360, it could just say provide new housing. Cut the number out, and then the concerns about those numbers and us not being sure that we're pushing hard enough on that number sort of disappears. If that's an amendment we could make.
Go ahead, Louise. Yeah, that's a yes. And I think one of the things to point out is, when we do the local plan, we usually have a site allocations policy document which identifies sites, and that usually gives an indicative number, but that number is not necessarily the number that comes forward. For an example, Patrick, in your ward we have Western Harbour, which at one point, I think we were talking about 2,500 homes, and once we've done further research and looked into it, it's now going to be considerably less than that. So I think if we change that in the report, it doesn't change the approver, but I think we may want to align in approved subject to removing the exact number. Is that acceptable?
It is. I think the other way to do it, Chair, would be to just make sure that the minutes reflected that, because as you say, it's not reflected in the note in any event, in the recommendation in any event. So if we captured that clear view of the committee. Of course, the other thing is that it's subject to development of a full business case, and that will only be approved in consultation with you, so that's something we can pick up through part of that process as well.
And I'm sure the other councillors will remind me of that as well. Any more comments or questions? Councillor McAllister.
Thank you. Just briefly, will there be a master plan for this project? I've noticed that, again, in the local plan, it said for projects of over 2 hectares, we would consider a master plan.
That is to be determined. It might be something of the phase master plan that developer wants to come forward. It probably will do, but I think it's very much in that developer's sort of like arsenal of how they want to take this forward. I can imagine a scheme of this size will have an outline consent with phasing. But I can't say today whether that will come through like that or whether it will come through as a detailed application.
Okay, thanks very much. To be clear, I don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I know that the gold prize we're all going for here is the SEN provision and the new school buildings. I think the silver prize of really good numbers of homes would also be really nice to strive for as best we can. But thank you for the report.
Just a
Councillor
Chair.
Sorry, John.
Oh, sorry.
Ali just came in first, then you.
Sorry, I just wanted to have a quick to say quickly thank you for the additional information that came forward on the playing pitches and the desire there to improve the quality of them and combat the fact that these are very poorly drained pitches and mostly unusable for the part. I wouldn't expect that level of much more detail on that at this point, but it'd be really good to hear something about assurance that the quantity of the pitches will be maintained as well as the quality, so that the amount of provision that there will be in the future will be the same level that there is currently.
Let me have a go at that. So I think the issue is that, Councillor, that where the building is proposed to happen of the houses is poorly drained ground which isn't very usable at the moment and is regularly not able to be used. But there are pitches there. So I think it's fair to say, obviously, we're going to have less space for pitches. And there's going to be more investment in the pitches that are there. So additional facilities are planned to come in as part of that, aren't they? It's probably fair to say that there might overall be less pitches, though, because but there'll be better quality pitches if you sort of better quality provision. I just wouldn't want to. So I'm not sure we can say to be the same number of pitches because we are taking some of the space. If that makes sense.
John, can we say, sorry, Ellie, but I think the point here, which is possibly what Councillor Kim may be saying, is at the moment we have facilities that are identified as being pitches but are not actually being used because of the poor drainage. So I guess what we want is basically to hear that there will now be pitches that will be able to be used on a regular basis. Is that a good summary? Do you want to?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's just assurance around those kind of grassroots football clubs and etc. And the school kids themselves can have that access to sport and football that they're going to need in that area of the city.
So do you want me to so yes, one of the things that OCL are intending to do is upgrade and increase the level of sports provision for the schools that will then be available to the wider community out of hours. And that will include new 3G pitches, a new rugby pitch, a long jump area, a running track, changing rooms, better lighting, better flood lighting for all year round provision, to build on what they've already got and to improve what they've already got. So in terms of pure space and acreage of playing pitches, no. But what will be provided is an enhancement to the sports provision that's already there, which is usable all year round. And I can provide you a list. If you weren't at the briefing, I can send you the presentation that we did issue to members that does articulate all of that detail.
That would be great, thank you.
John.
Just a quick one, actually, Chair. Given that this is obviously a very important transaction and a very complex transaction, presumably updates will be coming back to this committee?
Very happy to, Chair. Yep.
Any more questions or comments? In that case, I'd like to move that the Committee for Strategy and Resources, 1, authorises the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the Chair of the Strategy and Resources Committee, the Section 151 Officer and the Executive Director for Children and Education, to agree terms for a landowners agreement with Oasis Community Learning for the disposal of land, subject to a satisfactory response from the Secretary of State for Education regarding the disposal of playing fields and a full business case being agreed. 2, authorises officers to work with Oasis Community Learning to progress with soft market testing that provides indicative detail on the financial implications of disposing of said land to a developer, including the likely cost of construction and any residual land value. 3, that prior to a decision being taken to enter into a development agreement and disposed of the land, a full business case is agreed by the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration in consultation with the Chair of the Strategy and Resources Committee, the Section 151 Officer and the Executive Director for Children and Education. Can I have a seconder for that, please?
Seconded.
All those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against, please raise your hands. Any abstentions? So that was 7, my maths again, really bad. 7 for and 1 abstention. Okay, I'd like to move on to agenda item number 8. Thank you, Louise. Thank you, Tim. Which is Microsoft Desktop Licensing Agreement Procurement. I'd like to advise the committee that this report identifies the requirement to replace the Council's current contract for Microsoft Desktop licensing, which comes to an end in June 2026, and seeks permission to do this. The proposal will ensure seamless continuation of Microsoft 365 licensing and removes any risk of breaching procurement regulations that would arise if the Council was not able to award a compliant contract in good time. This is a key decision as it involves spending more than $500,000. In the absence of Polly Thompson, I would like to ask Tim Barwick to present the report. Tim, can you introduce yourself and your job title as well, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Tim Borrett, Director of Policy, Strategy and Digital. Apologies from Polly, who can't be with us today. So as the Chair outlined, this is seeking permission to procure and award our Microsoft Desktop Licensing Agreement. This underpins absolutely everything the Council does. Nearly every employee of the Council has some form of Microsoft license, and we procured that in one go through a reseller, and then have flexibility over the types of licenses we provide to ensure that we get the right fit for the right staff and don't overpay. We currently spend almost £2.2 million per year on licensing, and so where we have put a number in here of 7.5 million, that is very much a ceiling for the value of this contract, not a target. And indeed, work is done very frequently by the team to make sure that we're optimising the use of licenses, so not having people who've got an advanced licence when they don't need one, making sure that we recover licenses from temporary contractors, for example, for reuse. So there's quite an industry that sits beneath this to ensure that in reality we get best value from the agreements. Members will see in the paper today also a notional figure of 1.26 million for Microsoft Copilot licenses. At this stage, just for clarity, we're seeking permission to procure the value of those, but not actually to pursue buying any further licenses at this time. It just makes commercial sense for us to package this up within the procurement so that we have the ability to buy Copilot licenses over the next 3 years if that's something the Council chooses to pursue. But that's very much subject to a current trial of AI services, full business case, and a future key decision by this committee before there is any further expenditure on Copilots more widely. In terms of route to market, we're recommending the use of a Crown Commercial Services arrangement. Having discussed this with various suppliers and with Microsoft directly, we believe this offers the best value. There's a roughly a 40% discount on the CCS framework versus going alone. And we've been advised we'd be very unlikely, even if we found other partners, to achieve that kind of value, and it would be a much more complex tender to do it in a different way. So the path of least resistance in this case is also the best value one. Just finally, I wanted to cover briefly what's covered in the licenses. This can seem like quite a high number if you think of this of your email and your word processing. But just to give you a sense of what's in the E5 license suite, yes, it is all of those Microsoft tools we use every day, like Word and Excel and Outlook, but it's also our online document management system through SharePoint and OneDrive. It's our Defender security suite, which is everything around our junk mail filters, our antivirus, our phishing protection and products of that nature. It includes Purview, which is the compliance suite. So that's all the information governance tools, like being able to categorize the type of emails we send and restrict how information enters and leaves the organization. It also includes the voice and communications, so all of Microsoft Teams, but also effectively our landlines now are all run through Teams as well. It also brings in all the compatibility with Copilot and AI. And finally, Power BI Professional as well is included within the E5 license. So a lot of our data and insights access and access to our data dashboards is covered by this too. So it's quite an expansive license that most people have that cover a real core of technology the council needs. I hope that's clear. One point I did want to flag with apologies is I do see on review of the papers today a TBC on the number for Copilot in the EQIA and a different number for Copilot in the Environmental Impact Assessment. Apologies, that's the nature of a live project. But just to clarify for members, the number of 1.26 million in the main cover report is the correct number for that.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Any questions or comments? Kevin?
Just one quick question. Did we consider maybe entering a longer period of contracting, and just give us a view of why 3 years is a sensible decision? Other than that, I'm happy with the report.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yes, we did consider that. The reason we've gone for that medium term is that Microsoft do have a tendency to revisit their licensing options fairly frequently and what makes up it. So a product, for example, moving in or out of E5 may determine if we actually really want that license or need it for certain employees. So we've tried to strike that balance of long-term value, but a little bit of flexibility as the model can change so frequently.
Any more questions or comments? And I should point out by this time, as somebody who used to work with a particular company mentioned, that 3-year policy is probably very valid given what's happened previously. Okay, in that case, if there's no more questions or comments, I would like to move that the Committee for Strategy and Resources, 1, authorises the Director of Policy, Strategy and Digital, in consultation with the Chair of the Strategy and Resources Committee, to procure and award a 3-year Microsoft desktop licensing contract in line with the procurement routes and maximum budget envelopes outlined in this report. And 2, authorises the Director of Policy, Strategy and Digital to invoke any subsequent variations specifically defined in the contract being awarded up to the maximum budget envelope outlined in this report. Can I ask for a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you, Sarah. All those in favour, please show your hands. And that's unanimous. Thank you, Tim. Okay, agenda item number 9 is the update on the development of the culture strategy. I would like to advise the committee this report provides an update on the development of the city's culture strategy, outlining progress on engagement, the emerging investment plan, and the proposed next steps to support growth and inclusion through culture. This is a non-key decision. I'm going to invite Phil Walker, Head of Culture and Creative Industries, to outline the report. And then I will, once Phil and Elise are finished, Councillor Townsend, I may ask you if you want to comment as the chair of the Task and Finish group. Phil.
Thank you, councillors. So as the leader has described, and this is about an update rather than a decision that you're being asked to look at. Just to describe what's in the report. So the first 8 or so paragraphs describes the strategic context within which we're working and sets out the rationale and the case for a renewed cultural strategy for the city. Paragraph 9 describes the outcome of a recent economic and social value study and impact report, which shows the economic and social value of the city's cultural activity. And that's also detailed in Appendix A. Paragraphs 10 and 11 describe the engagement activity that is either planned or has commenced. And it's worth noting that over 1,400 people have already been engaged in conversations and discussions around what might be in the strategy to date. New activity includes commissioning artists to engage with communities across the city, website, and various other activities which are also detailed in Appendix F. The last couple of paragraphs, 12 and 13, describe the new approach to devising a cultural investment fund. This is following work which we've undertaken with consultants and with expertise in cultural funding and governance models. And as well as estimating the potential for such a fund, it's drawing on a combination of philanthropy, business sponsorship. We're also exploring the potential for using a portion of strategic community infrastructure levy to support other ways to invest into the cultural sector. Paragraphs 14 and 15 describe some of the other ways the Council currently invests into culture and or supports culture in other strategic ways. And I think that's probably enough by way of introduction. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Councillor Townsend, did you want to make any comment before we move to everybody else?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, in addition to what Phil and Elise have been working on as well, obviously you've mentioned the Cultural Working Group, which is the first time we've had a culture-based committee in the council, I think certainly in the last 20 or so years of living memory, which kind of speaks to the importance that we're putting on culture in the city, and then also our renewed good relationship with the Arts Council South West as well, where we've been having regular meetings with yourself and the Arts Council. Nick's come to it, Heather's also come along as well, and that's really increased the connection and support that we have in the city for the sector, and also it resulted in an increased investment from the Arts Council into Bristol. I think it's something like, I've got the figures, going from 11 million in 2016 to 14.4 in the last financial year, which sort of speaks to the relationship that we've built with them in the last 18 months.
Okay, thank you. And my inbox is also testament to the interest that Bristolians have in their culture. Any other comments or questions? Councillor King.
Hi, yeah, I'd like to firstly understand the SIL element that you were referring to. It's my understanding that SIL can't be used for revenue costs, and it also doesn't sit independently of local political decision making, i.e. the council decides what to allocate it towards, and if any shocks came up, for example, things like the new cut walls, then those are the things that we kind of have to sort of prioritise in those situations. So I'd just be interested to understand a bit more about the conversations around that, please.
So there are conversations are still at early stages, it's fair to say, around a strategic SIL, but we do appreciate that it is prioritised for city infrastructure projects primarily, but there are instances in other parts of the country where strategic SIL has been used in a variety of different ways, including supporting cultural activity, so not necessarily purely on infrastructure. So the report that we had commissioned described some of these activities as being options, so we're going to explore whether that's feasible within Bristol and to what extent that might be able to provide some funding.
Okay, yeah, the sort of every conversation I've ever had about SIL has kind of been quite clear, and about the spending rules around that, so it would be quite interesting to understand how we're redefining that, and how exactly, considering the very strict definitions we've had historically on that from the council.
So we've had this advice from one of the consultants that we worked with. We haven't explored it in depth at this stage.
You want to come in, John?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Councillor, thank you for the question. As you know, we do have to look very carefully at what qualifies and what doesn't internally, and we're not at this stage seeking to allocate any strategic SIL. I think the proposal really is to fully explore it as a potential for using it. And if the recommendation was that you could do that, then we'd obviously have to get an approval to do that from committee, I'd imagine. So, but I do hear what you say. I mean, I've been party to discussions looking at the rules, so we'd have to make sure that we're meeting not only things which might be the case in other areas, but that we meet our own requirements here as well, wouldn't we? So.
Great, I've got a few more if that's all right. So it'd be good to understand from, I suppose, Annie, the task and finish group that's been happening, how, because I kind of opened this paper to read it thinking there would be a draft to read, and I wasn't, and there isn't one yet, but there's been a task and finish group to develop the conversations and bring it forward. So is there when are we to expect to see a draft so that we can actually have something, I suppose, more substantial to discuss?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, because I had to get it up and I didn't quite hear everything that you just asked.
When is the draft strategy going to come forward so that we've got something to discuss that's more concrete?
I think Elise has probably got the best answer for the timeline.
Yeah, thanks. We're hoping to get a draft strategy to September next year. The reason why it's taking so long is because we need to make sure, for a really good reason, and we need to make sure that there's really strong citizen engagement with the voices that we hear from least. That's how we're leading our engagement. And obviously that means it takes longer, and we need to make sure that any investment that we're putting into goes directly into the hands of cultural organisations, and to not direct, but listen to citizens about what they want from culture. And that takes a bit more time, but we're definitely seeing the development of the strategy and those creative commissions as part of the process of developing, because the previous cultural strategy we had, it did lack that citizen engagement, so we want to make sure that that's really strong, and any ambition that we're putting forward as a city is also including that citizen voice. We also have a regional project that's been happening called the Citizens Assembly for Culture, which the Combined Authority have been leading on. And there's going to be a set of recommendations from the Citizens Assembly for Culture specifically for Bristol. And also we want to make sure that those recommendations are embedded. So we absolutely cannot preempt what the themes and the requests from the citizens is going to be. So we want to make sure that that's what leads the draft of the strategy. So the short answer is September, October time, but the long answer is why it's going to take a bit longer.
If I can just add to that, thank you, Elise, is that the working group is very much focused on cross-party support and working together. So the ask has always been to the Labour councillors on that group for them to be taking back what we're talking about to your group, to engage with you all about it, and then to feedback from your group what your thoughts are. I hope that is happening. We haven't had any feedback particularly from Labour councillors on the group yet, but hopefully going forwards, especially as more concrete parts of this comes forward, that conversation can happen within your group, and those three councillors can feedback, because it's really useful and also really, really important that we do, because the whole aim of the working group is to get cross-party support across the chamber so that we all understand the value of culture and the importance of funding it and all the different elements of it as well, which is why we've been doing cultural conversations, so that everybody in the working group, but also the council as a whole, all the members here, can understand the various facets of the sector.
That's great, and we've got our members on there to have those conversations with, and that's really good. I guess the next bit that I need to kind of get my head around is the ask in the recommendations about. So we're being asked to endorse the development of the strategy, but also the next steps in seeking new investment models, and that's quite a difficult thing for us, considering some of the budget proposals that are coming forward that we have different opinions to the administration. And it's great to see the paper recognising that for every £1 invested by the council, we leverage £88 from arts organisations, and that's an incredible result, I think. But the council's budget process does propose to reduce funding to zero over a phased approach over the next several years, and that's what's currently on the table. So even though the strategy, one of its key aims is to get trust from the sector, that sort of sits at odds with me a little bit with that proposal. So it's quite difficult to, whilst I want to see the strategy come forward and want to see an iteration of it that we can then discuss here as a committee, it's also difficult for us to talk about the next steps in seeking new investment models when we don't agree with the current one that's being proposed in the next budget process.
Yeah, thank you. If I can respond to that. I think at its core, I agree. We all see the importance of culture, and we've got the data to kind of really quantify that as well. The problem is art and culture isn't one of our statutory obligations. And so under the consultation, we've had to consult on every possible part of wiggle room, even if we don't want to see those cuts ourselves. And I don't want to, I know Phil and Elise don't want to either. In terms of the cuts that we have had to the sector over the last 10 years, since 2016 in real terms, since Marvin took office, over 55% cut in real terms, actually. Now, having a cut down to zero is not something we want to see. However, with the decreasing funding that we're getting from central government, the changes to DCMS, the changes potentially facing the Arts Council, we are having to look at all options and trying to future-proof the sector as much as possible. And that's what we're looking at lots of different ways that we could possibly fund it in the face of what we are facing. It's not something we want to do, but Kelvin himself said a minute ago about the dilemma of governance. This is one of those dilemmas. It's not something that we want, but it's good, better, best. How do we, in the current context, do what we can to protect the sector and find alternative ways of funding it if we cannot fund it in the same way as we have done up until this time?
Yeah. Governing during austerity is a very different thing to what we're governing through now. And, you don't need to teach me about that because I was in the cabinet and I know exactly how hard that was and those difficult decisions, and we took them as well. It is not the same as the situation that you have now. And you're even talking about being oven ready for a 150 million government programme and so that you can bid into these things. So it just feels to me that these are political choices that are being made. And whilst you're presenting this in a local context, you're then talking about relying on WECA, a Labour WECA mayor, and a Labour government to come forward with some of these funding solutions. So these are choices that are being made. And you need to also recognise the impact that austerity has on the council, and recognise that that is an impossible context to be delivering these programmes during. And it'd be really helpful if we talked about having these collaborative committee systems and yet being able to direct the responsibility for that funding where it was at, which is that the Conservative Party. And I think you know that. So it would be more helpful to me, I think, if we could talk about having this collaborative spirit of committee working, but then make sure that we're putting the responsibility of where some of those impossible decisions came from. And it wasn't my party.
Okay, we're in danger of getting into a discussion about political decision-making at central government and local government, rather than talking about the update on the development of the cultural strategy. I think we've all had the opportunity to express our views back and forth. So moving it back to the cultural strategy, I've got Councillor McAllister and then Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to reflect a bit on some of the discussions we were having last week during the Finance Subcommittee meetings, talking about the just funding available. And I think I do want to. I think that in the circumstance, in the financial circumstance the council is in, this is a really good strategy. And I think obviously we would like to see more funding available for the cultural sector. I'm very conscious that last week all the savings options we were discussing were necessary for the delivery of the balanced budget, which is a legal obligation. And I think we do need to recognise that we are still operating within very constrained financial circumstances, and that a lot of hard work has gone into presenting this strategy to make it as good as it can possibly be in the circumstances that we're in. So I'd like to thank the officers for that hard work, and I know that we all want to see as much funding for the cultural sector as possible. and hopefully we'll be able to provide more. But in the meantime, this is an excellent document, and I look forward to voting for it. Thank you.
Kevin.
Thank you. Yeah, well, Phil, thanks for the report and acknowledge the massive work you're doing at the moment. So I just want to sort of acknowledge that and thank you for all that effort and work you're doing. I think I do have some issues around the funding piece, right? Certainly when we talk about relying on, you know, well-meaning individuals to give us money towards this, it might be very relevant in terms of certain projects that people can get behind, but often in order to do that, you need a group of people like fundraisers in order to do that, and I don't suspect that we're not suggesting we have a bunch of fundraisers coming into the council to do that. I know that certain museums and what have you will have their individuals that can kind of support people that are willing to support us, but I think we're not supporting the idea of a whole group of people coming in to do this particular piece. So I would suggest, because just in order to try and keep us together on some of this, we absolutely agree with around the development of the strategy. I think we're very supportive, Labour, around that, and want us to get to a really interesting and a well-meaning strategy. So I would really like to split the recommendations into two recommendations, the one around endorsing the development strategy and then the investment model being a separate one, which we wouldn't necessarily vote against, but we might abstain to that because I think there's so many questions about that, really. I understand that we're putting cuts into place to meet a balanced budget. I understand the pressure that local government's under. Slightly different pressure than what it was during the Tory austerity years, I must say. But there are funding pressures with demand going up and the rest of it. So I just think there's so much more work we need to do to understand whether or not we can stop this arrest and we can get to a position where we can carry on funding, because this is having a big effect, a real world effect on some of the individual organisations that are subject to this. So if we can split that out, and then I think we could probably go forward with a sensible
Okay. So in the interests of seeking peace before Christmas, I'm going to propose that we do split so that we will have a separate vote on endorsing the development of the strategy and then endorsing the next steps in seeking new investment models. What I will also say as well, as leader of the council who's been working very closely at the figures, that in many ways all of you are right in different ways. We have seen an improvement in the funding that's coming towards Bristol from central government. However, the funding we're receiving still does not keep pace with the increases in our costs due to growth in areas like social care and children's services. And we are still, according to a report published on the House of Commons library, we are still well below, in real terms, the level of funding we had in 2014. Both the previous administration and this administration are still coping, like many other local authorities of all persuasions, with the impact of that. And that is why we're having to consider various options in order to bring forward a balanced budget. And you know, I understand that people feel very strongly and passionately about this, which is why I'm glad we had that debate. But what I'm happy to do, unless there are any other questions or comments, is to move to the vote. Okay, so I would like to move I'd like to move the motion for the Strategy and Resources Committee to, one, endorse the development of the strategy. Can I ask for a seconder for that?
Seconded.
Thank you. So all those in favour, please show your hands. That's unanimous. Can I also move that the Committee for Strategy and Resources endorses the next steps in seeking new investment models? Can I have a seconder for that one, please? All those in favour, please show your hands. Those against, please show your hands. Abstentions, please show your hands. So that's 6 in favour and 2 abstentions. Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item 10, section 106 funding for MShed and its environs. I've had real problems saying this word all day for some reason. So I'd like to advise the committee a list report seeks approval to commit Section 106 monies reserved for MSHED and its environs, which is approximately 1.045 million, on a project which will improve the interactive exhibits and sustainability of the museum galleries. The project will also significantly enhance visitor facilities at MSED, with a particular focus on improving toilet provision, including the installation of a changing places toilet, and making the building much more accessible to all. It will improve the appearance and accessibility of MSED within the public realm, creating a more welcoming and inclusive environment for all visitors. In addition, the committee is asked to note that use of £25,000 from the feasibility fund framework has been approved by the Capital Investment Board on 6th of November 2025 to support the Stage 1 feasibility work to procure outline designs, define the scope and pull together a high-level cost plan for the portion of the project involving changes to the building fabric and services. If approval is given to this project, the feasibility study will be funded from the S106 monies. And I have to say, I feel like I've just read out the report. But I am going to invite Philip Walker, Head of Culture and Creative Industries, to outline the rest of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, you have. I'm not going to say much more as it's in the report, but just there are three main areas of improvements will be made. One which will be in the gallery displays themselves, so much of the visitor feedback, much of the negative feedback was around the dated displays and some of the interactives particularly not working, so we need to upgrade those. As mentioned in the intro, the visitor facilities are just substandard now. We have had millions upon millions of visitors since MSHED opened in 2011. It's been incredibly successful, but it's tired and requires updating and replacing. So the toilets will be fully gutted and replaced. And just to note that the important improvement will be an addition of a changing places toilet, which will improve the provision there, which is much needed in the centre of Bristol. And it will be a great addition for MSHED. And then the third aspect is in the public realm, in the immediate vicinity within the footprint just around MSHED. So the Section 106 monies came from the development to the rear of to the south of MSHED. And so there's an expectation that some of the public realm area will be updated and improved as well. It sounds like a lot of money, but it doesn't go that far. So I think the expectations need to be tempered a little bit. We could spend probably that figure on each of those individual elements, but we have to spread it around some of the improvements so that we will get improvements in all of those different areas. I think that's all I was going to say in terms of...
Okay, thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Kevin and then Patrick.
Yeah, sorry I missed the start. I just wondered, this is a pedantic, quite a small point in the scheme of things. I just wonder about the disabled facilities. They're changing places. It's a great thing to have and recognise that, but we're not... I don't know if you've got the detail here, and maybe you can come back to me, but we're not, sometimes they're not like two disabled toilets into one to create it, and that does keep some pressure on then the numbers of disabled toilets available. So I just wondered, are we making sure that we've got additional facilities, if we possibly can, in providing this, or are we reducing the number of disabled toilets in order to do it?
Thank you, Councillor. We haven't got to that level of detail, but we will be able to do that when we have the plans. There is limited space. You're right. I would hope that it doesn't result in a net reduction in disabled toilet facilities. So we'll look at that, and if the committee wants that level of detail, we can bring it back. But I take your point, and I'll make sure that we look at that. Thank you.
Patrick.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing this. It's really fantastic to see that we're bringing this level of investment into one of our most important cultural offerings. I think it's a shame, if anything, that the funding sat in a box on a shelf for so long after we received it, but it's good that we're bringing it into use now. I have a few questions on this, although I don't think any of them are particularly complex. So we're told that the capital project cost won't exceed the total envelope of S106 available. What assurances do we have of that? Obviously projects, especially projects on big old buildings like the M-Shed, can overrun quite easily in terms of costs. So what assurances do we have that in 8 months down the line, M-Shed won't come back to the council and say, look, we're out of money, and if you don't give us more, we won't be able to open at all?
So we will be getting project management support from within the City Council to help ensure that we are clear about all of the costs. We have delivered projects successfully in the past within budget and time frame, so I'm not overly concerned, and there'll be contingencies built into the project itself. So there'll be, as I said, there'll be contingency and there'll be project management support to ensure that we stick within budget. I hope that gives you the reassurance, but I appreciate you've just got my word for it at this point.
It does, thank you. I suppose that the corollary of that then is, what happens to that contingency money if it doesn't get spent?
So we'd need to spend, or I mean, I don't suppose it's any good if it gets returned and sits in an account. So we'll find a way to spend it. I mean, we've got, as I said, we could probably spend this money 3 times over. So we'll make sure that there isn't, if there is any contingency, that we have ways of spending it within the project.
Thank you very much. And just a question on the methodology. How did we arrive in the expected 15% uplift in visitor figures, please?
So we know that we've been, since COVID, the visit figures have been down. We also have done some calculations around the improvements based on the expected uplift in visitor satisfaction levels, which should result in increased footfall. So we know that people will be visiting because it's a better quality offer. We've seen a drop off partly due to the quality of the exhibits. So if they can be improved, that again should result in an uplift in visits. And I think the 15% is a conservative estimate.
Thank you very much. I mean, it would be good if we can see like a grand reopening sort of event to drum up interest as well once the works are complete. A slightly localist concern then. We've got the working heritage steam railway system. M-Shed's not within my ward, but the railway does go into my ward past some residential homes. I'm wondering, would it be possible to use any of this money to try and green that steam train a bit? Because especially in the summer months, a lot of my residents do complain about the coal smoke that blows through their windows and things like that. And it is in the clean air zone, so I was wondering if is it possible to use any of this investment for something like that, do you think?
So we did take some legal advice around what that Section 106 M-Shed and its environs actually constituted, and it was clear that it couldn't include the railway, the harbour railway. So it could not. So we did explore whether or not we could spend some of this money on the harbour railway, but we've been told that it's not, because it doesn't constitute being within the environs, because it runs all the way to Aborn.
Okay, thank you very much.
Annie?
Thanks. Yeah, M-Shed's not in Patrick's ward, but he's desperate to have it. So Yeah, I just want to say thank you very much for bringing this and this way of spending the money. Some much needed investment into our exhibits. It's going to really improve our museum offering and our footfall as well. And it just, again, it speaks to the many ways that we invest in culture across the city. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, in that case, I'd like to move that the Committee for Strategy and Resources, 1, approves the use and spend of all Section 106 monies reserved for MZ and its environs, which is approximately 1.045 million, on a project which will improve the interactives and sustainability of the museum galleries, improve visitor facilities, particularly toilets, and enhance the appearance of MZ in the public realm. 2, in addition to note use of £25,000 from the feasibility fund framework has been approved by Capital Investment Board on 6 November 2025 to support the Stage 1 feasibility work to get outline designs, define the scope, and pull together a high-level cost plan for the portion of the project involving changes to the building fabric and services. If approval is given to this project, the feasibility study will be funded from the S106 monies. 3, authorises the Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the Chair of the Strategy and Resources Committee, to take all steps required to spend Section 106 funding, including procuring and awarding contracts over the key decision threshold as outlined in this report. Can I have a seconder for the motion?
Seconded.
Thank you, Sarah. All those in favour, please show your hands. And that's unanimous. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Lise. It is now 3:30. Does anyone want us to take a 5-minute comfort break? No? All right, let's take a 5-minute comfort break then. Okay, let's make a start on the next agenda item. Agenda item 11 is Collection Fund Surplus Deficit 2025-2026. I'd like to advise the committee that this report sets the estimated collection fund surplus or deficit as at 31st of March 2026, as required by legislation for determination by full council. This is a key decision as it affects more than 2 wards, and I would like to invite Ben Chayton, Finance Business Partner, to outline the report. Ben, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, councillors. As the Chair said, I'm Ben Chayton, and I'm the Finance Business Partner for Technical and Accounting. Today, I'm presenting the forecast surplus deficit on the collection fund for the financial year 25-26, and these figures matter because they roll into next year's budget for Bristol and our preceptors. Firstly, the council tax position. As shown in the table in paragraph 2 of the appendix paper, at 31st of March 26, we expect an overall council tax surplus of £4.565 million after taking account of balances brought forward. Within that, there's a small in-year deficit of £0.114 million explained in paragraph 3, and the main drivers of that are discounts, mainly single-person discount, adding £2.6 million to the deficit, exemptions adding 0.6 million, and these are offset by premiums on empty and second homes, reducing the deficit by £1.2 million, and fewer council tax reduction scheme claimants and improved arrears collection, saving about £1.7 million combined. Bristol's share of the surplus on council tax is around £3.9 million, as shown in the table in paragraph 20. Secondly, onto the business rates position. In paragraph 19, you'll see for business rates, we are forecasting an overall deficit of £10.394 million, including an in-year deficit of £5.102 million. The table in paragraph 11 explains the key drivers of that, and that is reductions in rateable values across many properties, costing £2.6 million, higher mandatory reliefs, mainly small business rate relief, adding £1.4 million, and an increase of £0.2 million in the appeals provision for interest on successful appeals. The appeals provision remains significant at £23.3 million, as detailed in the business rates appeals section of the paper, and Bristol's share of the business rates deficit overall is £10.738 million, as shown in paragraph 20. As summarised in the last section of the paper, the overall collection fund is in deficit by £5.829 million, despite the council tax surplus. For Bristol specifically, the impact is £6.851 million deficit because we take most of the business rates hit. The risk assessment at the end of the appendix highlights the main risks: business rates volatility, change in rateable values, and difficulty estimating council tax discounts and exemptions. If approved today, these figures will go to full council in January and then feed into the 2026-27 budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Any questions or comments? Well, okay. Heather, Patrick, Kelvin.
Yeah, I mean, I partly put my hand up because I thought it looked like no one else was going to, so I'll just make a quick comment. I think it's I'm really glad to be seeing that numbers of working age adults for the council tax reduction scheme has decreased. It has been particularly hard to continue protecting that, and I think that this justifies that where we can offer the financial support and support people, actually, hopefully, their financial situation gets better and they start to move off it. And actually, we are therefore spending less on it than in that part of it than we were for that reason, rather than sort of taking away the support when people still need it. So that's something to celebrate in this report.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing this. I would just like to say I'm really happy to see that we are getting better at collecting arrears. I think that's a really important thing, not just for our revenue, but also for people in business' perception of fairness in the system. If people, if the public perception becomes that people are getting away with not paying their taxes or rates or anything, that erodes trust in the council and the work that we do. So thank you to the work that the team is doing on that. And yeah, thanks. It's good to see that is having a positive impact on our overall revenue as well. Just a quick query. in the report, it says the collection fund is forecast to close with an overall deficit of £5.829 million, with Bristol's attributable share estimated at £6.851 million. Are those figures the wrong way round? Because I would assume that Bristol's share of the total would be the smaller number, not the larger.
The figures are correct, but I appreciate they do look counterintuitive at first glance. The £5.829 million refers to the overall collection fund position across all preceptors combined, so that's council tax and business rates, and that's in paragraph 20. The 6.851 is Bristol City Council's attributable share, and that's higher because for business rates, Bristol City Council bears 94% of the deficit, which is around 10.738 million before offsets, compared to our preceptors, Wecker and Avon Fire. But for council tax, Bristol has a surplus, so we have, we take, bear with me, 85% of the surplus itself. And there's also, sorry, bear with me, and so that nets to Bristol's net combined position of 6.85 million deficit across, while the total across all parties is 5.829. So that happens because the other preceptors have smaller shares, and there are some negative adjustments as well in this calculation. For example, there's an amount, a negative 1.03 million in the business rates calculation of the overall deficit, which relates to a historic surplus from 22-23 related to our balance sheet. So that's more of a technical adjustment that we need to do, but it does make the numbers look a little bit counterintuitive.
Okay, no, thank you for that explanation. That makes a lot of sense. And then just a general observation, if I may, Chair, please. We've got a £2.6 million deficit on the collection fund, and that's partly due to 1.6 million adverse movement on the single person discount on the council tax. I do wonder if this is maybe something we should reflect in our development policies moving forwards to try and incentivise relatively more 2 and 3 bedroom properties as opposed to 1 bedroom properties, which are more likely to not be eligible for the single person discount. But that's maybe a conversation for another time. It's just something that struck me reading this report. Thank you again for bringing this.
Okay, thank you. Kevin.
Thank you for the report. My question is, it's great to see there's an uptick in collection. My question was just to sort of for clarification, really, for me, is this use of bailiffs. Now, I know, Tony, you've given a commitment that's sort of in line with the commitment that Marvin gave, I think, as well, in terms of our use of bailiffs. But could you just clarify in this? And this could apply to the next 3 items, actually, in terms of where I pitched it. But I thought I'd pitch it in the collections part of this of this report. So I was wondering whether we can be clear about our use of bailiffs and the appropriateness of it, just so we've got that clear. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Blake. The honest answer is it's a collection of things. So at the start of the year, which is about to finish, we were in quite a significant backlog of work. So we've put more resource into that. We've had some agency workers. We've also done quite extensive recruitment, particularly in the council tax space, so a little bit in NDR business rate. So it would be really difficult to quantify exactly how much of that is due to the increase in resource and how much of that is down to the use of enforcement agents. But at the moment, and it will come on to the item which we're going to talk about at the end, which is my item, there is some work going to take place with regard to a debate and discussion about our enforcement agents. But the answer to your question is it's a combination of things.
Well, I think, to give my personal response to that, obviously, as a publicly funded organisation, we have a responsibility to collect debt that's owed to us, and including collecting our council tax. But, and you and I have discussed this previously, we also have a responsibility to ensure we do not provide additional harm and injure people's mental health and well-being by chasing debts that are simply unable to be paid. So there's a combination of things. One of the things we're doing is looking at how we can do that in a way in which we ensure we have conversations with people in debt so that we can establish exactly what their situation is. But that requires a two-way conversation, so it does require people to get in touch with us. So I'd like to thank you for me having the opportunity to say, you know, on this webcast that where people are in debt and they are concerned about being able to pay, they need to contact us so that we can help them.
Thank you, Tony. That was important to say. Thank you.
Any more questions or comments? Okay. Well, I'd like to say thank you for the work we're doing, but don't disappear because we got you for the next item as well. So I'd like to propose that the Committee for Strategy and Resources approves the report and calculations as set out in this report and refer to full council for approval. Can I have a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you, Sarah. Can I ask all those in favour to show their hands? That's unanimous. Thank you. We then will move on to agenda item number 12, which is the council tax base for 2026-2027. I'd like to advise the committee that this report recommends the council tax base 26-27 to full council. This is a key decision as it affects more than two wards. And again, I'd like to invite Ben Chayton to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this item is about setting the council tax base for the financial year 2026-27. This figure determines how much council tax we can collect next year and must be agreed before we notify our precepting authorities. The calculation is explained in the opening section of the appendix. The headline position, as shown in the table under paragraph 1.3, is that the recommended tax base for 26-27 is 137,029 Band D equivalent properties. Now that's an increase of 1,019 properties, or 0.75% compared to the previous year. I'll talk about the main drivers of the change. The appendix sets out the main adjustments behind this figure. So in growth, we've added 1,898 Band D equivalents for new developments expected to be banded during the year. On the council tax reduction scheme, we've had fewer claimants, and that actually increases the base by 85 Band D equivalents compared to last year. On student exemptions, we've removed 2,915 Band D equivalents from the base calculation to allow for properties likely to qualify for student exemption, but not yet registered at the time of calculation. On second home premiums, we reduced the base by 1,034 Band D equivalents because some second homes will become student properties. And for losses on collection, we apply a 98% collection rate, which is the same as the previous year, which reduces the base by around 2,797 Band D equivalents. As shown in the 5-year comparison table in section 1.3, the tax base has grown steadily. In 24-25, it was around 134,752. In 25-26, around 136,000, and for 26-27, the calculated tax base is 137,029. So this year's increase of 0.75% is smaller than previous years, and that reflects slower growth and the adjustments for exemptions. So in summary, the recommended council tax base for 26-27 is 137,029 Band D equivalents, which will be used to set the budget and to notify preceptors. If approved today, this recommendation goes to full council in January. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Kelvin, did you? No. Anybody else? Patrick and then Heather this time around.
Thank you again for this presentation. And again, I'll just, not sound like a broken record, I'll just welcome the improvement in our collection rates for all the reasons I outlined previously. Really good work from yourself and the team on this. I wasn't going to say this, it feels like incredibly minor, but you said in your presentation that we had an increase of 1,019 properties. In the appended table, it's listed as 1,018. I was just wondering if that was like a typographical error or something.
It was built this afternoon, Patrick.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a small rounding error in the table, so apologies.
I understand. Thank you. I assumed it would be something like that. Thank you.
Heather.
I really support the second home premium, and it has been clear to me that it has started working this year because I've certainly had casework about it and then had to explain the policy and why we support it. But it is interesting when you get that feedback that yes, people are noticing, and it is maybe making a difference. Like, what? I might have to come back from Saudi Arabia or sell my house? Yeah, Maybe. So yeah, we're feeling the impacts. People are asking about us. We're able to explain the policy and make some more money, so that's good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions or comments? Okay, in that case, I would like to ask the strategy, I'd like to move the motion that the Strategy and Resources Committee approves the report and calculated amount as set out in the report and refer to full council for approval. Can I have a seconder for that?
Seconded.
Thank you, Sarah. All those in favour, please raise your hands. That's unanimous. Thank you. Now brings us on to the last agenda item, which is, just double check, just in case, agenda item 13, task and finish groups supporting low-income households. I'd like to advise the committee that this report seeks approval to extend the terms of reference of this group to enable further work to be undertaken to review use of enforcement agents and debt collection arrangements. This is a non-key decision, and I would like to invite Graham Clapp, Head of Revenues and Benefits, to outline the report. Graham.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report, as said, is to seek approval to extend the terms of reference of this group to enable further work to take place to review the use of enforcement agents and debt collection arrangements, if I could say it. The evidence base is that the current terms of reference for the supporting low-income households task and finish group that was approved in January can be found at Appendix A, but just to go very quickly through it, as you'll all remember, what that task and finish group predominantly did was looked at the best way to spend the household support fund, or as Councillor King corrected me, crisis resilience fund, as it will be from next year, money wisely. Members have since indicated that they would like to extend, change the remit of the task and finish group to consider the following. Consider our current use of enforcement agents and the potential detrimental impacts of them, especially for those who are classified as vulnerable. Look at alternatives to maximise debt collection before or instead of using enforcement agents. Review all communication that relates to debts. Make recommendations for changes on how we collect council debts. It is therefore proposed that a task and finish group will undertake an additional 6 meetings, or around 6 meetings, which will start in April of 2026, with the findings from that group then reported back to the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee. So the officer recommendation is that the Committee for Strategy and Resources approves the extended terms of reference for the task and finish group on supporting low-income households.
Thank you. Councillor Matt, do you want to comment?
Yeah. Thank you. This has taken a bit of back and forth and round to get to this point, but I am really glad, and I have discussed with the other parties about, so hopefully, I'm hoping this has got support because everyone's sort of contributed to the proposed additions. And I think that it is such a complex piece of work, because on one hand, we just talked about the fact that our collection rate, it's good and it's getting better, but on the other hand, we all know that we are hearing difficult stories about the use of bailiffs, and whether everything is operating within our policy, whether the policy is exactly right or what we need to do there. So I'm really glad that we will be able to do this in a cross-party way, because I don't think it's something that is helpful to get politicised. I just really want to get it right, and I have to say the work that we've done thus far as a task and finish group has been really, really good, and I think every member significantly impacted the output of that work from all the parties. So I'm really glad to be continuing that. We've talked about this work commencing in April. That's not what I wanted. I really wanted it earlier. I said that we would have to do this in the public meeting. So I really wanted to get started as soon as possible. I also realised there's year end, there's putting out council tax bills. So I guess I wanted to say, I've pushed for this to be as early as possible. And Graham, I believe, if you can answer this publicly, officers have come back quite firmly that this is as early as we could begin this work to have officer capacity to support it.
That's correct, yeah. As you said, with annual billing and council tax billing, it really would be difficult for us to provide the appropriate resource before the council tax year end. So that was my pushback.
Yeah, so hopefully we can get those meetings booked in from that point, and booked in maybe every week or every couple of weeks to get the work done. But yeah, we need the officer to support to do the work well. So I accept that this has to be the case. And I hope that people will support. And I also understand there might be changes to other parties' membership to this group, because it has rather gone on being created since being created the spring last year. So I completely understand if other parties switch their membership. But I really look forward to the cross-party engagement with this.
Thank you, Eva. Ellie?
Firstly, I'd just like to thank Graham for the work on the Task and Finish group so far, and for Heather for chairing. It was a really great group, and I think you chaired it brilliantly, and it was very rich discussions, and I felt like everyone's views were taken on board. So thank you for that. Can I just get a bit of clarity on, so like with the new additional terms of reference being added, are the original ones still going to be considered as well, or is that done, that bit? I'm specifically thinking about things like the Crisis Resilience Fund, which comes in April, and the discussion that's needed around how that will be processed and how community organisations will be impacted. And I know that there's quite a few that I've spoken to recently who are interested to know how that will work for them, and I'm sure those conversations are already happening. But is that still part of the remit of this, or have we moved on to solely look at the enforcement and debt collection piece?
I'll answer if that's okay. So it's a really good question. And part of that will depend on whether the Crisis Prevention Fund, whether it's very similar to the fund from earlier this year, whether the principles that we agreed earlier this year can fulfil the requirements of the new fund. And I think there's always a balance of how much you go back and review and look at and reconsider decisions. So for the Household Support Fund, get the right acronyms here, that wasn't significantly reviewed for a number of years. I think it's really good that we had that quite in-depth review last year or earlier this year. I wouldn't be minded to open that up again every year when there's other significant pieces of work to do, if the principles that came out of our work earlier this year can follow over to next year's fund. And that does depend. We think that the new fund will have very similar aims to the fund it's replacing. If it has very similar aims, we would intend to just continue with those principles, maybe not the exact, as close as possible in terms of how the money was allocated between those same organisations, I think. And let's see what Graham says.
My view would be, whatever we decide to do, the proposal for CRF would have to come to this committee anyway. So what I would propose doing is, once we've got an indication, maybe late January, if it's nice, early February, of 26-27 funding, that I mock up a proposal which reflects what we talked about last year, bearing in mind what money we've got and where we go, and that before we go anywhere near full council or anything, that comes here anyway. Now, what we do with regard to a debate in advance of that as to how that's influenced is probably not my decision.
So just on that, my preference is always for the opportunity to have a cross-party, or even of that group members, to have a briefing on it beforehand. When it gets in this chamber, these things become political, and I'm absolutely with you on that. This absolutely should not be political. But I'm just thinking about the potential for it to be a multi-year funding. I think there is potential for it to have differences, and if not, then fine. But I think we'll take a steer from yourselves when you get the detail through of what that will mean for Bristol. If it does have things that would be worthy having a discussion, I'd just really appreciate it if we could have the opportunity. But yeah.
I would be happy to commit, Graham, to doing that briefing and then seeing. Well, I mean, you're going to have to understand
what I was going to say.
A 45-minute.
That's what I was going to say anyway.
Yeah.
So it makes no sense to bring it here sight unseen to everybody, and you go, really? I mean, it's not going to be hugely different. Let's be honest. It's going to be broadly similar. But what makes the most sense is get the allocation, have a look at what we did last year, what fits, what doesn't fit, and then around that, put a date in the diary for a briefing for strategy and resources. Then it comes here and gets debated, is the word.
Strategy, resources, and the members of the task and finish group, either as was or as is. I think open it up to those, so those that were involved in the work earlier this year would be great.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think Katrina and Heather and Ellie have decided to give you some extra work, so I don't think we need to take a vote on that. But unless there are any more comments or questions, then what I'd like to do is ask that the Committee for Strategy and Resources approves the extended terms of reference to the Task and Finish Group on supporting low-income households. Can I have a seconder for that?
Seconded.
Thank you, Sarah. All those in favour, please raise your hands. And that's unanimous. And that's the last item on the agenda. I would like to thank everybody for their contributions. We still got a few more days of work to do, and then we'll be at home pretending not to work whilst actually working our way through the local government financial settlement. I have every intention of doing that whilst in my pyjamas with a woolly jumper with a glass of port on one side and a mince pie on the other, because that might make the numbers look easier to read. But thank you everybody, and have a really great holiday period, and see you in the new year. Thank you.